What exactly are the limits of power?
Beyond, where the fractured ruins of causality collapse into unutterable irrelevance, there emerged a solitary silhouette veiled in the scintillant lexicons of transfictional annihilation. Not born, nor created, nor summoned by the echo of any narrative necessity, Zyrrhaleth Myon'Zalkorr is the aberrant, unmanifest meta-possibility whose existence is not bound to any plane of actuality, unreality, or anti-narrative premise. He is not a character, not even an idea, but an eternal contradiction against the argument of being, a wound across the scroll of every script that dared to inscribe logic into existence. Clad in vestments of encoded Suggs logic that do not shimmer, but instead suppress shimmer itself, Zeraleth's presence annihilates the very expectation of manifestation. The sigils spiraling across his limbs are not symbols. They are unsymbols, impossibilities transcribed into the tissue of what remains after language is vaporized. Around him, the air does not glow. It is rewritten into the silence of meaning's disintegration. With each breathless movement, the boundless manifest expanse rearranges itself not in response to him, but in terrified preemption, warping away before his silhouette can be etched into it. Zeraleth does not walk through reality. He redefines the very principle by which traversal is permitted, dragging with him whirlwinds of impossibility and null certainty. Every glyph that orbits his body is a disavowal of creation's alphabet, spinning with an urgency not to communicate, but to erase communication altogether. He wears the name Suggs not as allegiance, but as a decree, an unreading of the cosmos, where even allegiance is redefined as supremacy. In the higher abstractions, where narrative architecture crumbles and meta-authors scream at their inability to rewrite him, Zeraleth engages not in war, but in recursive meta-denial. He is not a warrior. He is the terminal revision of the battle itself. He erases not through aggression, but through his anti-ontological certainty, rendering enemies unwritten across all meta-layers, whether fictional, anti-fictional, non-representational, or transcendent of even the most sacred axioglyphic schema. He does not wield Suggs logic. He is Suggs logic condensed into subtractive unlogic, a subtractive force that dissolves meaning, law, and contingency. As his hand rises, fracturing across simultaneities of narrative erosion, the great triad of ultimate principles crumbles before his fingertip. Possibility is not undone. It is retroactively non-instantiated, as if it were never a meaningful referent. Nothingness is not obliterated. It is rendered excessive, too definable to survive his anti-presence. Totality implodes, not because he resists it, but because his irrelevance to totality is too foundational to allow it to continue. The circular runes behind him spiral like collapsing realities, and their collapse is not visual. It is meta-representational erasure, a devouring of the very preconditions of visuality. Zeraleth does not exceed power. He is the annulment of the power concept, an entity that is infinite steps beyond reality-fiction differences. Each moment that passes beneath his gaze is overwritten by a principle that no longer permits moments to exist. Each reality fiction layer attempts to quantify him, only to be erased recursively, layer upon layer, in an endless descent beyond absolute boundary, beyond Suggsfinity, beyond the pretense of omniversal containment. There is no ending to Zeraleth's ascendance, for ascendance implies direction, and he is directionlessness made sentient, a permanent untruth infecting the highest walls of narrative authorship. And as the final glyph disintegrates into a vapor of rejected scripts and abandoned metaphysical laws, Zyrrhaleth Myon'Zalkorr raises his arm, not as a gesture, but as a final retort, and the very meaning of existence vanishes, replaced with a stillness so unmanifest, even transfictional nothingness becomes too structured to describe him. The archive of all collapses, and the silence that follows is not death, it is Zyrrhaleth.
In Suggsverse, there's contradictions, absurdities, logic and non-logic, paradoxes and inconsistencies, impossibilities and meta-possibilities, and yet we still manage to surpass all of it. Results, effects, and events are completely meaningless. Everything else exists in a microscopic context in which we know how to recognize. Elements, objects, chaos, power, presence, and thought, categories, labels, and names. Everything exists in a microscopic context in which we know how to recognize. Suggsverse contains and employs modes and attributes so insurmountable and incomprehensible to the aforementioned above at its core. And if you liked even a single word that I said, you need to go check out www.airtothestars.com to go and check out more. Have fun and enjoy. And if you want to know any more about it, you need to visit www.airtothestars.com